Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and this week I'm honored to have the opportunity to introduce to you someone who I was first introduced to through Lisa Meister's podcast, Only God Rescued Me, My Journey Through Satanic Ritual Abuse, and whose story had a profound impact on my heart and soul. Introducing MK Ultra and child abuse survivor, independent investigative journalist, researcher, and writer, blogger, podcaster, mother, grandmother, walking miracle, whistleblower, and one of the most important voices of our time, Angie Power Disney. When I first listened to Angie's 5-part testimony on Lisa's podcast, I cried at the horrors she endured and yet rejoiced at her strength of spirit and courage to speak her truth. A generational trauma survivor of a cult active family, Angie and her 4 sisters were sold into the MK Ultra projects by their military active father as small children and endured horrific orchestrated abuses perpetrated by the Air Force, government, and military. Angie spent the first 5 years of her life in the hospital for alleged bronchitis and was recognized within her military education as being a gifted child. Being raised by a father who was also an internationally recognized dog trainer and breeder, as well as restaurant owner and alcoholic, Angie and her sisters always heard and were given excuses as to why they found themselves in situations surrounded by political and societal royalty and aristocracy. Having endured horrific abuses at the hands of perpetrators, Angie wasn't conscious of the depth of her abuses as a child, but still found herself rebelling against the programming installed within her unconscious mind. It wasn't until Angie grew older that she would recall and realize that the abuses, abusers, handlers, and doors that would open and close in her life were all orchestrated to keep her asleep to her truth and compliant within a system that was grooming her for her permanent place within the cult. Yet even after years of abuse and torture beyond any comprehension, her abusers underestimated the power of her human spirit and the power of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Today, Angie stands tall in her voice and conviction, speaking up for survivors with courage and speaking her own truth aloud, even when her voice shakes. It can be traumatic and exhausting for survivors to tell their stories over and over again. So although we will still tie in pieces of Angie's testimony on this episode, I'm going to link below her 5-part series that she did with Lisa, and would love if you all went and listened to the amazing job she did on getting her story out of her body and into our ears and hearts. Today, Angie's going to be discussing 2 very important topics that have been weighing on her heart and that are crucial for us to understand as a society. The first being generational trauma, and the second being medical abuse, and specifically how medical abuse relates to MK Ultra survivors. I ask all of you listening to give Angie your full attention. She's a wealth of knowledge, and as you are about to see, she's also a hero. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming MK Ultra Project Whistleblower, Woman of God, Voice for the Voiceless, Selfless Advocate for our Children, and Generational Circuit Breaker, the one, the only, Angie Power Disney. Angie, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. You're a gift. You're a gift, and thank you for that introduction.
You're welcome. I'm so honored to have you on. Your story was so impactful to me, and it's amazing to me that you can get up and talk about it at all, but the fact that you were able to get all of it out over the course of those 5 episodes is just amazing, and you did it so bravely.
It's taken decades. I did make a DVD which is on Vimeo around 2010, 11, my first attempt to kind of get it out there, what I remembered at that time. And then I got interviewed in 2013 by Miles Johnston, who's a kind of a UFO, ex BBC, ex Sky News truther, but he had an agenda. He's also a Knights Templar and a Freemason, and familiar with the royal family and Balmoral Castle and so on. And so he kind of set me up a little bit. He came to my home in Ireland and he filmed me for 11 hours. But um, a lot of people are familiar. If you allow the mainstream media or even fake alternative media to film you and interview you, the power of editing, we see this at the moment with the Tucker Carlson Jan 6 disclosures, the power of narrative creating and cutting, pasting, clipping, and editing. It's been very hard to disclose on a platform with integrity. And that was the beauty with Lisa, was that I've had offers since 2010 to publish a book of my story. I've written several books. I haven't published any of them, but I had an offer in 2010. I was invited to Louisiana for 10 days on a speaking tour, and it was a privilege. I went into women's prisons and Lake Charles and homeless centers and schools, and did this amazing speaking tour in Louisiana. And then a publicist approached me and said, if you just write your book, I'll just represent you all the way across America. And they invited me back a year later for an 8-week stay with accommodation, vehicle, speaking engagements. And sadly, my health let me down and I wasn't well enough to go back. But it's like asking somebody with DID to put their story in order, like make a timeline and make it make sense. It's you have to deprogram just to even do that. So Lisa was my safe space. Like the last time I disclosed at that level was 2013 with somebody who turned out to say, I was hunted by aliens. Instead of saying I was hunted by elites that I can name, no, he made a narrative that I was human hunted by aliens. So Lisa was my safe space. So yeah, I would respectfully request that people go back and review that 5-part series.
It was phenomenal. And I know that we'll talk about some pieces of that today, but for anybody who might be new to your story, I covered a little bit in the intro. Is there anything you wanted to fill in the gaps or anything else that you'd want to add to what I said to just give people a good little snapshot of your background and who you are today?
Okay, I'm going to be 66 in June. And my father, who just only died less than a year ago, was allegedly Irish Catholic Republican, one of 16 children, born in Dungarvan in County Waterford in Ireland. And my mother was an English Protestant from French Huguenot descent, Protestants that fled France during persecution. And they intermarried in what I discovered later was a program, because the think tanks, which are now like the WEF or WHO or Bilderbergers or Davos, these crazy elites that think they can, like create the future for humanity. Well, they were doing that back all, since World War One, World War Two. And one of the programs was to intermarry Irish and English people because the Irish were considered too rebellious and untamable. So there was a program financed and funded to intermarry English Protestants with Irish Catholics. So my parents were caught up in that. And my father, even though ostensibly from an Irish Republican Catholic family, he ran away at 19 and joined the British Air Force in Belfast. And then he met my mother, and then they married and had us 5 girls. But from research, particularly with Kathy Morgan, we discovered that there was a program to intermarry Irish Catholics and English Protestants to try and dilute the unmanageability of. There were 2 races that the predator class found a problem. One was the Irish Celts, and the other was the Africans. So they were 2 races that were deemed too rebellious and unmanageable. So they recommended intermarrying to dilute whatever DNA had this rebellious trait in it. So
Wow.
I've studied, yeah, I've studied there's 5 documented generations of abuse in my family, and even though I get a lot of opposition to discussing the other people in my story, but I find it's absolutely crucial to understanding intergenerational abuse. And it fascinated me on your channel where you said 3 generations is likely to embed the issue, the problem. And like I said, I've documented 5 generations in my family, and there's probably more, but to me it's crucial to understanding. So I had the privilege of spending some quality time with both my parents, both of whom were criminally abusive towards and neglectful towards my sisters and I, and many grandchildren. But at the same time, I had the privilege of spending some quality time with them before they died at 95 and 87. And the disclosures they made to me and the research I've done with others has blown me away. It's just blown me away. So for instance, my father, right, the abuse, as far as I can document it, in my experience, started with my Irish grandfather, who abused me when I was 11 and abused my siblings around the same age, 10, 11, 12, 13, abused my cousins, as I later discovered, and acted as if he appeared to be a humble man. He was a railway man and he was a clock mender, and he was a barber, and he would do a little bit of farming, and he would do a little bit of work in the local public houses. Like he was painted as this heroic Irish patriarch, father of 16 children, and jack of all trades, 5 trades, and so on and so forth. But there was something with the bigger picture, there was something not adding up. So there were several anomalies. One was him and his wife had 16 children, but 5 died. And you might say, well, that was poverty. It's not abnormal for 5 children to die out of 16, but I find that kind of quite a high death rate. 4 of them died in infancy or toddlerhood, and 1 of them died aged 4. And I find that a bit suspicious. There were also things like there were many ritualistic kind of sadistic abuses that he carried out, which I thought were one-offs until I started to relate to other survivors. So, for instance, he kept a coffin in the living room of the cottage. We would go and visit every summer, and there was always a coffin standing up. And when we would ask, what's that? Why? And we were just told, oh, it's a, it's a odd neighbor who's terrified of dying a pauper's death. So he's bought his own coffin and he's asked your grandparents to store it so that he doesn't get buried a pauper's death. And when you're children, you just think, oh, okay, then, all right, then. So he kept a coffin in the living room. And yet later on, my aunties disclosed how they would be locked in the coffin for a joke. It's not a joke, it's a ritual, but for terrorization and horrification. So the coffin wasn't just standing up in the living room, it was used by my dad's siblings to torture some of the younger siblings. And things like he kept goats, and he would laugh a lot when the English grandchildren came home for an annual visit, and then the goats would headbutt us round the garden and really hurt us and terrify us. And my grandfather would just explode with laughter. Things like, there are photographs of him putting the 11 children all beside each other and making the first child hold an electric fence. And then he would watch the electric shock go through all the 11 children. And my grandfather would be unable to contain himself with the hysteria of how funny it was to see all of his children electric shocked. And then it only came home to me from an outsider's point of view. One of my cousins is married to a very normal English school professor, and he came to visit my father in Wiltshire, where we lived, and we had horses and so on. And one of my father's party tricks, much like his father with the electroshock treatment and the aggressive goats, one of my father's party tricks was to put people that weren't able to ride horses, he would put them on the wildest horse that we had and watch them get bucked off. And some of them would incur like permanent back injuries, like incur lifetime injuries from being bucked from a dangerous horse. And my father would roll on the ground laughing about it, you know?
Oh,
And yeah, there was a sadism
yeah.
that was disguised as humor. It was disguised as, oh, how funny is that? Look at these English, townies coming, and look at them. They can't even sit on a wild horse, And with my grandpa, it would be like, oh, look at these English, in-laws, or, and they're scared of a wild goat, or they go out to the outside toilet and get chased by a rooster. It's just sadism around animals, and lots of rituals that way. So something I feel strongly about, a lot of Christians in particular will say, oh, I've never reported my dad or my brother or my adopted brother or my whoever it was. I've never reported them because I'm a Christian. I forgive them, and that's great if you can, if that's my personal stance. Although I forgave both my parents and loved them to the end, but my personal stance is I stand on the scripture. If we confess our sins, God is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. But there's a lack of responsibility if people hide behind, oh, I'm a Christian, so I've forgiven them, so I didn't report them. I'm a walking testimony that because my mother didn't report my Irish granddad, like he abused her for probably about 8-9 months. My dad was in the Air Force and he was stationed somewhere overseas, and he wouldn't let my mum and us first 3 babies stay in a military hostel. So he said, no, you have to go home to my parents. I'm not letting you stay in a military hostel. They all commit adultery and they're all, like scarlet women. So you're going home to my parents. So he sent my mum back to his parents with the eldest of us three babies. And she got abused every day by my granddad, her father-in-law. And she eventually got the courage up to say to my dad, your father's molesting me daily, and I can't bear it. And I believe he was molesting us babies at the same time too. I have some memories. But my dad came home and had a word with his dad, and they decided not to go to the police. They decided that if my dad had a word with his dad and said, stop molesting my wife, that it would stop. And as soon as my dad flew back to his military posting, his father resumed abusing my mother and said, oh, ha ha, you thought you'd get me in trouble, what, yeah, ha ha ha, like that didn't work, did it? And then he intensified the abuse. So then my mother said to herself, okay, well, the way I'll protect my children is I'll never leave them alone with him, because I know from experience what he's like. But she was also, I believe, volunteered into the programs. She would dissociate. She was more than once, probably 3 or 4 times, put into hospitals where she was electroshocked, and so she would forget. And so she left me alone with my granddad when I was 11 and my cousin was 9. And when I said, and he abused me, he molested me. Fortunately, I ran away, but not before I was utterly traumatized. And when I asked her years later, if he did that to you for 8 months, Mum, what possessed you to leave me alone with him, aged 11? And she said, oh, well, your cousin was with you. I thought you'd be okay. Well, my cousin was clearly a victim too, because she just stood in the doorway and watched the attempted rape, just frozen, just like a frozen dolly. She just stood in the doorway looking. She didn't scream. She didn't say, stop it, Granddad. She, and I ran away. I ran away after being molested, and my granddad chased me, pulling up his trousers, pants, you call them, and he stood at the back door and shouted at me, no telling tales out of school, Missy. And so, and then I found out later that he had actually raped one of my sisters, who's now dead. She was in boarding school about 30 miles from him, and she would be sent to him and my nanans for like holidays and stuff. And she told me that she was raped. And then my older sister, my granddad was caught in the act. He had drilled a hole in the bathroom. He came to visit us in the UK, and my mother found a hole drilled in the only door that had a lock on it in our home was the bathroom. And he had drilled a hole in the bathroom to look at us children taking a bath or a shower. And my mother discovered that. So I'm like, how could you do that? How? So my point is, even though my mother said the family persuaded me not to go to the police, my point is your failure to report allowed at least 3 of your 5 daughters and many other grandchildren to go on to be abused by that same abuser.
Yeah, and that's the thing, that how you were saying, yes, maybe you were able to bridge that gap and have a relationship with that parent or that abuser, whoever it is, but your forgiveness doesn't mean that they are healed of their sins and that they're not going to keep perpetuating it.
Absolutely.
And that's why these stories, that's why you even just speaking about this and talking about it, it's so encouraging for me to see that, because I hope that on the other end, it gives people the courage too. Because I think when you haven't gone through something really hard, it's almost like having a bad breakup in a sense, where you want to defend somebody that you love, and people on the outside looking in can say, well, of course I would report that. Of course, but when you're being manipulated to the point where you're dissociating and you're being abused to the point where you're dissociating, you don't have that comprehension of, oh, I can just go tell somebody. Like, you're brainwashed not to. You want to protect this person. That's your father, that's your grandfather, that's your boyfriend, whoever it is. And so we get away from reporting because we're scared of what that person will think of us if we do, or how it'll tarnish the family name or tarnish this person. And what we don't realize is that that person could be going out and abusing other people, other children, because of our lack of courage to be able to say something about it to somebody.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's huge. It's like I am a forgiving person. I still am a bit naive, and I still will think the best of people, even when there's red flags. There's a meme, a funny meme. There were so many red flags, I could have knit myself a scarf. And I could still be that way. But the truth is, and then even as I say that my mother should have reported to the police, but the truth is, there's a huge amount of police involved and invested with this anyway.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily that reporting would have stopped it. I thought I could stop abuse. I knew that my grandfather was an abuser. He'd abused my mother, myself, at least two of my siblings, and a few cousins, probably others too. And then other abusers in our extended family network who had abused multiple members of the family. And I thought, right, it stops with me. When you start to come awake, you think, okay, it stops, the buck stops here, and I'm going to break it in my generation. And I'd become a Christian. I'd learned about deliverance. I'd learned about breaking intergenerational curses. And I thought, right, the buck stops here. But I'd underestimated the thing that you highlighted, the demonic, diabolical embedding of generational curses. And I should talk about my mother's side too, because it
Please.
was very easy to think, okay, my mother was a victim too, and it's the women that are all victims and the men that are wicked. It wasn't always that way. My mother was criminally negligent and probably criminally complicit. I I recall an incident, at least one incident, where my father held me down and my mother crushed Valium into my mouth to stop me objecting to a severe beating, like such a severe beating I couldn't walk or talk for a week afterwards. My father held me down, my mother crushed the drugs down my throat. um there were times when my mother watched us children getting beaten so severely, it was off the pale, it was off the charts. And she would just say, "Oh, that's enough, Nick. No, no, stop now, Nick. That'll do." But even as she tried to wake us for school or for hiding away the next day, and we would say, "I can't walk," and look at my bruises, and uh, you know, look what he did to me. She would just say, "Well, you were naughty, weren't you?" You know, I can't exonerate my mother. And a shock to me was, for a long time, I was all focused on how my father, my Irish father's side of the family, were abusive. Because even when my mother told her mother in law, "Your husband is molesting me every night," she said, "Offer it up as a penance." She was a devout Catholic, and she advised my mother to offer it up as a penance.
Oh,
Yeah. And her my dad's eldest sister used to chastise my mother when she was living there for 8 or 9 months with three babies, waiting for my dad to get a billet. um his older sister would chastise my mum for hanging her underwear on the washing line. She would just, "You've got no shame. You know just treat English Protestants as outcasts. But once, I don't know whether to jump ahead or jump back. Like, a strange anomaly recently is 2 of my 3 children got their DNA done, with one of those ancestry DNA things like 123.ie. And my mother's family tree has been impeccably traced by her brother before the days of the internet, where you used to trace the family tree by going through births, deaths, and marriages records and registrars, and you'd go to graveyards, and you'd spend years researching the family tree. So one of my mother's elder brothers researched the family tree for years, and they were French Huguenots. They were called Dupre. They fled from France to England, and then they settled in Wales, and so on and so forth. But then when my 2 children got their DNA done, there was no trace of my mother's alleged ancestry, and instead there was Roma Gypsy blood, ancient Roma Gypsy blood, and no trace of French Huguenot Dupre's settled in Wales, and so on and so forth. And that made me look at my mother's background. Now, her father, who was a Dupre and a French Huguenot and a World War I veteran, decorated, and an employee of Henry Ford, and a father of at least 2, if not 3 children working for British intelligence. But he and my nana had 4 children, twins amongst them. And then 10 years later, allegedly, along came my mother as a surprise addition to the family. And now, when I look at the DNA discrepancies, I think, was she trafficked? Was she quote unquote adopted? What is that? Like, there was this huge, it was almost as if my mother was in programs from very, very young. She was born, well, allegedly born into this family of military people, and she was a Protestant, and she was a Sunday school teacher, and she used to go to like youth camps, and she was all on a trajectory where she would marry a vicar or a lawyer or a doctor. She was in a certain sort of middle class trajectory, and then it was almost as if she got tagged. And first of all, she got evacuated from the Blitz in London. So they made this program, which I believe now was a trafficking program. They made this program to evacuate all the children from London, because London was getting bombed by the Germans. So they would take all the children and send them out to foster homes. So my mother was a victim of that, aged about 4 or 5. For 4 years, she was sent away, and she only got brought back once, and that was for her quote unquote brother's funeral, because he was a victim. He was killed in World War II in combat. So she came back once in 4 years. She got moved between 2 foster homes in that 4 years evacuation. Her father only visited her once. And then when she came back, she was also a gifted child, and she suddenly got offered a scholarship at a very expensive Jesuit influenced Catholic school called Ursuline Convent in Brentwood. So you've got this Protestant child, middle class child, suddenly being offered private education in a Catholic school, which her parents availed of. So they let her go off to this Catholic private school where she excelled. And then she got offered a scholarship then to go to, she used to play the piano and sing opera, and she got offered a scholarship to go into musical theatre in London. but her father wouldn't allow it. It was looked down upon. So he said, no, there's no child of mine is going to go on the stage, you know. So she was forced at 16 to take a job in the City of London, a very privileged job as a kind of secretary or whatever. And then she got engineered into marrying my father, even though she was almost engaged, you know, on the trajectory she had been on. And then she meets this Irish man, who already had two fiancés that he forgot to end it with. And he swept her off her feet. Her parents disowned her. Her mother didn't attend the wedding. Her father attended it in tears at the back of the church. A fiance that my father had forgotten to break off with had flown to the wedding with her mother and wept at the back of the church. And so it was almost doomed. It was almost marked. And then the brother, I'm sorry this is complicated, but the generational thing is really important. My mother had 3 brothers and a sister. All the 3 brothers were in the military. One was in the Navy, one was in the Air Force, one was in the Army. One in the Army died in World War II. The one in the Air Force ended up in Canada, and the one in the Navy was very sadistic. And the one that ended up in the Air Force in Canada, my sister, the one that I believe was murdered in 2015, she told me he raped her when she was 15. He drove her home. This uncle drove her home when she was 15. And she says he stopped in the lay-by and he had sex with me. And so I ended up telling my mum that a few years later, maybe a few decades later, and the wife of that uncle. My mum was horrified because it had always been, oh, your father's got the wicked family. It's your father that's victimized us all. And then all of a sudden there were things coming out about her side of the family. Well, actually, your brother raped my sister at 15, you know. And then my mum would let slip ritualistic kind of things that her siblings had done to her. Like, she was very rarely allowed to bring friends home from school, especially because she was in a Catholic school and her parents were anti-Catholic. Like, one of the times I stayed with my English nana, she looked out the upstairs window and she looked down the street, and it was a very lovely middle class tree lined street, and she said, oh, this was such a lovely road until the Catholics moved in. And I'm like, I'm so shocked because I'm being raised Catholic, you know. And then she kind of caught herself on and she said to me, oh, but I suppose they're like the blacks. They can't help how they were born. And it's like,
Oh my,
Nanny, you're taking a grave worse. It's like, just stop now, just
God.
stop now. It's like, and here am I, and like I'm being educated by nuns in private, just like my mum was educated in Jesuit influenced private education, which I believe was a huge it was like the educational arm of the Jesuit movement, were these nuns that would it was mind control. It was mind control, and they would make us into ladies. A fellow survivor and I call it ladification, and they would identify us for projects. They would say, this one's suitable for gifted child programming, she'll work for the United Nations. This one is we can put her into a project for mixed race interbreeding. This one we can put her into juvenile delinquent projects, you know. This one you know, drugs or suicide. The nuns, I believe, were like, the same way they say the Jesuits are the military arm of the Catholic Church, I believe the nuns, of which my auntie was one, a very senior, they were a huge element of we were, it was like battery farming of children. We went to private school, we were taught deportment, elocution, international languages, public speaking, debating, French cuisine, etiquette. Just we were engineered. We were engineered either to go gifted child route and straight into like United Nations, WEF, all that kind of stuff, or to be targets of oppositional programs.
Now, are these schools that are still like, are these types of schools accessible to anybody, or were these specifically on a military base, or where were these schools?
They weren't on a military base. Some of them were military, like the Queen Victoria School in Scotland. Almost every one of these military inclined boarding schools, you'll find sexual abuse scandals attached to almost all of them. Almost, and not just like high level, like Thomas Hamilton, high Jimmy Savile, members of parliament. You'll find high level connections. They weren't just like the school I went to. Well, I went to quite a few because we moved every 3 years. My father was in the military for 25 years, and he could have chosen to just put us in one boarding school, but he chose to bring us wherever he was posted, and then we would be placed into a Catholic private education establishment. And they weren't always, they weren't, see, part of the deception with trauma-based mind control is because it didn't always seem horrible. It didn't always seem, there were many happy parts to that's the beauty of grooming and mind control, is that there has to be some good parts in order for you to keep engaging. So yeah, my mother's side, the two anomalies with my mother's side is, one, that the DNA that both two of my three children, and I'm tempted, even though I know it's all DNA gathering, but I'm tempted to get my DNA done just to see if for the third time it comes up that my mother's DNA does not match her family's research, which would indicate that she was either a trafficked child or an adopted child without ever knowing it, without
That's
ever knowing it.
amazing that you've been able to unearth all of that, because obviously, these systems and people, it's they try to keep all of that very hidden too.
I think it's part of the prayer thing. This is the thing that they can't. This is the thing that the Satanists or the predator class or whoever you want to call it, they can't account for the Holy Spirit. So they can't account for you making connections or information falling in your lap or dots joining that you didn't even go hunting down. That they can't account for, like, you and I connecting, or Lisa and I connecting, or whoever it is. Those things, to me, that's the beauty of the Holy Spirit, that no matter how much the predator class might refine algorithms or artificial intelligence or coordinated attacks, but they they can't mimic the Holy Spirit. They just can't. They can't. And I credit. I've been called a Satanist and accused of being an agent or Illuminati or whatever many times, and sometimes it's because there are coincidences and blessings that happen, and it's like, how did she find that out? How did that land in her lap? She must be on a payroll. She must be intelligent. She must be on the inside. It's like, no, that was the Holy Spirit. It's like, I have no, like, I was gobsmacked when my daughter had her DNA done, and she's like, there's no French Huguenot showing up, and there's this ancient Romany gypsy gene showing up on Granny's side, and I'm like, well, that's weird. Then my youngest son gets his done, and the same thing, and I'm like, by then my mother had died, and she probably wouldn't have liked. It might have been too much to say, Mum, did you ever wonder if you were adopted or trafficked, or she knew she was 10 years after the four older siblings, 10 years from the youngest one. She knew there was a lot of strangeness in her upbringing, but it might have been too much for her to hear that, what, maybe they weren't your parents, so it's like when you watch those programs, they do shows about that, and they say for some people it's devastating
Oh,
when
God.
when they yeah, when they do these DNA searches, like, oh my God, my dad wasn't my dad, and oh my goodness, and even someone contacted my daughter and said, I think your great uncle was my father. Was he based in York in such and such a year? And that's the same uncle that my sister alleged had raped her at 15. And
Oh my
and
God.
this woman who lives in San Francisco, from her research, he was her father from when he was when he was stationed in York and had made a woman pregnant. In world wars, there's a lot of people sleeping together because they think, right, tomorrow's not guaranteed, we might die. So there was a baby boom during the wars because everybody thought that tomorrow wasn't guaranteed. So there are all these GI babies, the same as in Vietnam and Korea, and there are loads of babies left behind, because for whatever reason. So yeah, that ancestry thing it throws up a lot of, like, it takes courage to look into the generations, and then I don't know how we're doing for time. It's 5:30. Right. I'll try not to make this, might be a part one. I'll try not to make it too long, but this is how complex it is. Even though my Irish granddad was supposed to be a simple man, um, but later research showed that the power side of my family, my father's side, Le Puer or De Puer, was a quote unquote lost bloodline that had previously not been Irish Catholic Republicans, but English Protestant invaders, having been gifted 10,000 acres by Cromwell, I think it was, by British invaders to Ireland, uh, um, and that they had only disappeared as a bloodline during the famine, because apparently many gentry were just as affected by the famine as the peasants. And so, as the gentry and the peasants fled from Ireland trying to stay alive, they started to intermarry in Wales, and forget who was gentry and who was peasantry, who was Catholic, who was Protestant, and they intermarried. And so the bloodlines got covered up. But it turned out the Power bloodline had lords and ladies and like architects of cathedrals, Freemasons, privy councillors to the royal family, and so, you know, many aristocracy. So even though nobody knew that until an American researcher linked up with me on power research and gave me all her research, which she won awards for. And then I tried to put it out to my Irish Catholic family, and they were horrified. It was like denouncing everything that the family, you know, it was like telling the Kennedys that they were Protestants or something. It's like, no, this is not going to fly. This doesn't fit the narrative at all. So it was rejected, even though it's been verified. But there were people that knew that information, because of the 11 surviving children of my Irish grandparents, they all got promoted really out of character. Like, they all, you know, if they were supposedly working class, no, it didn't fit at all. Like, for instance, one went to Wall Street and allegedly started off as a mail boy in a bank and ended up as a vice president of a bank on Wall Street, you know. And
Wow.
another, yeah, another became a multi-millionaire company owner, and his son, my cousin, is now a multi-millionaire who's inherited his dad's company. Like, the two youngest, the one that became the multi-millionaire entrepreneur in England and the one that went to Wall Street and became a vice president of the bank, they were the only two of the 11 that fully completed high school. And back then in Ireland, the only way you could complete high school in private education was if you said you were going to be a priest.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah, you had to have a vocation in order to be allowed to be considered worthy of educating beyond the age of 13. So these two youngest boys, it was kind of family joke. We both said we were going to be priests, and then at the last minute we ducked out and went off, became millionaires instead, you know, having had the Jesuit education, you know. And then like, but then another sibling of my father became this. That's why I keep reaching over trying to find a picture of her. She became this nun, and she became a mother superior and a mother provincial, and like, hugely influential all over the world. Tried to get me to become a nun, succeeded in getting another cousin to become a nun until she had a nervous breakdown and came out of the convent, and helped cover up abuse. You know, I used to get sent to her when I couldn't walk and talk and was black and blue, and she would just hide me and not ask what happened to you, what's wrong, is there anything I can do. She would just hide me until I could walk and talk again. And then when I finally told her, you know, your father abused my mother and myself, my sisters, she was like, oh well, I don't know what you're talking about, but I apologize now. Can you make me a promise never to discuss that ever again? Don't ever tell anybody that again. And
Oh, gosh.
and this was in the middle of the Catholic clerical abuse scandal in Ireland. And she was like, oh, they're just all after compensation. They're just lying. It's all a load of rubbish, this thing about being abused. They're just looking for compensation.
That
It's
goes
like,
right back to what you were saying earlier about when you don't expose somebody for the crimes that they did to you, then you're not stopping them from
yeah,
potentially hurting other people, and you got hurt because of her secrecy.
yeah. It's almost like you may think you're being. No, that's my graduation. A lot of trolls said I lied about my degree, but that's my actual
Oh, look at you.
graduation in 1981
Hi, Angie. Oh
with
my
my crimped 80s hair.
it's so cute.
But
You're darling.
what I was looking for was a picture of my. I've got them anyway. Pictures of my. I've showed a lot of these before, but pictures of my auntie the nun, and this was. Well, I better not show. No, I could show my San Francisco wedding outside City Hall in San Francisco. Oh my God.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that anyway. Um, and I was just looking for Auntie Mary the nun. And like, I don't hate her. This is why I love the compassion. I don't I don't hate my parents. I don't hate even my, you know, I don't hate any of these people. I'm just very cautious about people saying, oh, let's forgive, forgive, forgive. Oh, wow. Yeah, it's like this is a bad way to show it. I should scan these ancestors and families and nuns and stuff. This is the Disney family. This was my
Did the Disney side of the family have direct involvement with Walt Disney? Is that
no,
same?
I'll tell you, right, that's just, this is like
Oh,
very
God.
amateurish, but um, I'll
I'm
tell
so
you,
happy you have all those memories.
yes, yeah, okay, thank you. I'll try and be positive about that. I've done my research, and Fritz Springmeier is brilliant on some of this. The Disneys came from France in 1066 with William the Conqueror. The name was originally Dissigny, and it got shortened to Disney. Half of the clan settled in the UK, mostly in a village town called Norton Disney, named after them. The other half moved on to Ireland, Kilkenny and Carlow, and then emigrated to America and became Walt Disney and all that side of the family. So the side I married into and divorced from was not the American Disney side. I still believe they were heavily Freemasonic and elite, but half of them were the half that came to Ireland, then went to America, then founded the Disney Corporation. And the other half, like my father-in-law was a squadron leader in the Air Force, and my ex-husband was dissociative, and I think like that's probably enough to do for the first. I really want to paint for you the pictures without going too deep, but I want to paint for you how deep the intergenerational stuff goes, so that by the time you get to about the third or fourth or whatever generation, it's just the air you breathe. I remember confronting my father a few decades ago. I didn't have full memories of the abuse and trafficking. I did have some, but not all. But I definitely had memories of the extreme violence. And I said, why? I came home for a visit, and I said, why did you do that? And and he would say things to me like, oh sure, everybody in Ireland was abused back then, or everybody was beaten. That we didn't know any better. That was what we grew up with. And I really believe that. And in some ways, like in Ireland, they say 1 in 4 people are abused before the age of 18, sexually abused before the age of 18. And that's based on statistics. So if you add in those that don't disclose, it's more likely to be 1 in 2, 1 in 3. And so that's a shocking, horrifying,
Is.
like, can you imagine you're in a room of 4 people and at least one, if not two, have been sexually abused before the age of 18? Like how wounded is our how wounded are we as a race
Very.
to have allowed that to become a statistic, you know? But in a way, my father used it as an excuse. He was like, "Oh, everybody was abused back then. It's just the way it was. Just the Catholic Church. Just society. Just nobody talked
That's what
about it."
happens, right? It becomes normalized through the
Yeah.
generations until they
Yes,
don't know any better. That's just how the world is. And they don't realize
absolutely.
that that's not how the world should be.
And that's what I want to talk to you about, perhaps in the next connection, is about the normalization. This is why social engineering is all about normalization. And it's so insidious. It's like, this is why the predator class might spend 100 years planning how to normalize something. And it's like the boiling frog syndrome. So it's a creeping thing. So, if I do a family map of my parents, grandparents on both sides, uncles, aunts, and then those who married in, like many people that married into my father's generation or my generation actually turned out to be bloodliners themselves, and a vast amount of either pedophiles or victims, a vast amount, to the point where I didn't know what a functioning happy family looked like. I can remember we weren't allowed to mix very much with normal people, and I can remember being invited to tea with a girl from school, and her family was so normal to me. It was like I could not. It was like I was just on a different planet. And this is what children. This is why you find children fleeing back to their abusive families. This is why trauma bonding, you find them because the normalization is more dangerous or as dangerous as the abuse, because it's like poisoning, not just poisoning you, but poisoning the air you breathe, poisoning the water you swim in, poisoning your concept of normality. So you think this is normal. This happens to my cousin, this happened to my mum, this happens to my uncles, all our husbands or boyfriends are like this. We don't know why we're attracted to narcissists or liars or bullies or abusers. We don't, because it's the air you breathe. It's the air you breathe. And that my only reason, and I will tell more personal examples to just demonstrate that if you allow this to be normalized, it becomes the air the children breathe, and the children won't even know that they need to escape. They won't even know. I still grieve at my age at being alienated from my family because of whistleblowing. And I still grieve that I wasn't fully able to protect all of my own offspring, despite my most earnest efforts to flee to the other side of the world to try and protect them. And still because I hadn't done the healing I needed to do or even knew what DID was, I was still a wounded animal. And it's when you're a wounded one, it's like you've got an Nexium branding on you saying, victim, help yourself.
Yes, 100%, and what does that teach a child who's born in that environment? Aside from the fact that it becomes normalized, now when they grow up and they're, at that age where they can have friendships or relationships, now they're not taught body autonomy. They're not taught consent. They're not taught that right and wrong. They're not taught how to stand up for themselves. And if anything, they're told not to stand up for themselves or something bad's going to happen. They're told not to combat abuse, not to speak about it. And so you think about what that does to a child also growing up. And, we wonder why, even in families that aren't cult active, abuses can still be passed down. And it's because we're not taught healthy relationships. I wasn't taught narcissism until I was an adult. I didn't learn that in school. Nobody told me how to, identify a narcissist or a psychopath, or even what abuse looks like. We get so caught up thinking it's just something physical that we can see. If you can't see it happening, and if you don't feel it on your body, if you don't feel pain, then you question if it's actually abuse, if you don't have a handling on you. And so
Yeah.
we're also very ignorant to different types of abuse and how that impacts us, even with illness, and how that can manifest in our bodies.
Yeah.
And so I love that you're bringing attention to this, and that, survivors have such a strong voice from this. Cause like you said, I think, Sadly and horrifically, I think the amount of generational trauma families is way off the charts and way higher than we can even imagine, from micro levels all the way to, these very orchestrated programs. I think in so many different ways we've been damaged as a society, from governments, from mainstream media. We're constantly traumatized. And so even if that doesn't directly impact somebody as far as them seeing a physical hand on them, we're all being traumatized and then going home and being with our families. And, it's just this trauma bonding, traumatized society. It's a child abuse society.
I see it. I can see. I've studied really from World War II onwards, I suppose, intensely, and I was courted by a lot of elites and Illuminati, and I've had elites disclose to me. I won't say the name, but like one was like, "Oh, I had an affair. I was in boarding school from the age of 8, and I had an affair with the headmaster's wife when I was 12, and I was so lucky. Everybody was jealous of me." And this was a very, very highly accomplished, internationally known elite broadcaster, ex BBC, ex Sky News. And I'm saying to him, having an affair with a headmaster's wife when you were 12, that's not an affair, that's pedophilia. You were
Right.
victimized. And he was like, oh, rubbish. It was the best education possible. I like, it opened all sorts of doors for me. And then he talked about the rugby, in this private, very elite boarding school where they all played rugby, there was a female assistant, training assistant, and she had sex with the entire rugby team when they were 14 and 15. And he told me that, and I was just like, that's more abuse. And he's like, oh, rubbish, like, she was doing us a favor. We were in an all boys school and we had no idea about women, and she just taught us the ways of the world. And weren't we so lucky? She just did us a favor. And it's so that it's the normalization.
Yes.
I've had, I used to be connected to a lot of Rothschilds while they thought I was one of them. There's this funny shining thing on the camera, but never mind. And like the youngsters were connected for a long time until my Facebook got taken down. And then one of them would come out as transgender or whatever role. I've had elites contact me and say, is it true? Is it true? It's like we need to, no matter what, whether you're an elite or a children's home survivor or a homeless person targeted individual, we all need to recognize and step outside and get a bird's eye view of the social engineering that made, because I know victims from children's home that thought they were just rent boys. They thought they chose the victimization. They thought they chose it. They thought they were complicit because they were groomed and offered, lots of goodies at the age of 12 or whatever, and they said yes please. So they won't even bother disclosing some of them because they think they were equally guilty. They just think, and then they end up identifying as gay rent boys the rest of their lives, whatever age, and they can't join the dots about, wait a minute, what about the grooming part? What about the you weren't of an age to consent or make choices. It's like, who are those people? There are well-known people that have said, oh, I got abused by a Catholic priest when I was 9, didn't do me any harm at all. Now I'm a perfectly well-adjusted adult homosexual. What's the problem? And it's like, you can make your choices, but for goodness sake, step outside of the matrix and have a look and see where you were programmed. That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely. And you brought up such a good point with, the teacher who, the headmaster's wife who slept with a 12-year-old. that's another social engineering where they make it cool for young boys to sleep with older women. That's been engineered. And then on the opposite end, you have these older men being called sugar daddies instead of pedophiles.
Yep.
And it's cool now if you date a sugar daddy. It's not cool if you date a pedophile, but if he's a sugar daddy, it's
Yep.
cool and it's hip and you can post about it on TikTok, and go viral with
Yep.
it.
And this has happened with the OnlyFans and the Instagram and the way women have been seduced into believing that they're cool with what's going on. It's like the only two reference points I can, and at 65, but I can just point to the Bible and also point to there's a old-fashioned book called The Rules, and it's like if you want a husband and not just a boyfriend or a one-night stand, and it gives you all these lovely tips and advices, and it's the absolute opposite of what young women have been taught is normal and healthy. And you've got your OnlyFans page and your all over Instagram and your you know it's anyway. Look, if we can do a part two, I'd love to take it the next level and
Yeah.
talk about my generation and then the next generations, and just talk about, I just want to show, it's not that I want to shame my family line or my parents' family lines. I just want to demonstrate the intergenerational thing and look into some of the ways of breaking intergenerational curses. It's not just as simple as deliverance ministry and verbally and spiritually breaking curses. We have to walk it out. We have to know our enemy in order to overcome in some ways.
Absolutely. And yes, I'd love to do a part two on this for you. And I
Okay.
think I really appreciate everything that you shared. Just to give a little maybe advice to people who have never looked into their own family lineage. Do you have any advice, just because it kind of goes with this show? Where would somebody start to do that? Do you have any resources or websites or ways that somebody could maybe get started looking into their own generations of whether it's, trauma or just learning who they are?
Well, some of the, like Kathy O'Brien, I did very little research when I was starting to deprogram. I didn't want to read too many other people's stories because I didn't want to contaminate my coming awake. I did not want to adopt other people's stories um, because it was so shocking to me what I was starting to recall and join together. But the two people I did look into was Kathy O'Brien and Bryce Taylor, Susan Ford. Thanks for the memories, and that tied into my journey as well with Princess Honeychild von Hohenlohe, Patricia Wilder, who was a radio host with Bob Hope and a peer of Grace Kelly and Lucille Ball. But so Kathy O'Brien and then Bryce Taylor, um, and then probably James Casbolt and Max Spears. Although anyway, so they were probably the four people I thought, okay, let me just take a look at this, and Kathy Morgan. And what people advised me was look who look closer to home. Don't externalize your whole journey. It's like I'm guilty of this sometimes. I get swept up with trying to solve the Hampstead case, the Anglesey case. I get swept up with the journalism side of trying to solve outside cases. And that's good too. We shouldn't just be fully focused on ourselves, but if you really want to unravel, look at who you married, who were your boyfriends, who were your roommates, who were your teachers, who were your bosses, employers, people of significance. It's like you can make a map. You can make a map. You can say, right, from the age of this to this, who do I remember? It might be only one school teacher or one scout leader or one family member, or and then say from the age of 5 to 10, take it in little bite-sized pieces. And it took me years to do this, like, and I'm still only realizing that people I thought were good friends or lovers turned out to be military sent in ones. You know, they turned out to be programmers. It's like, you know, Kanye West. I'm not saying if if he's truly reformed or not, but the guy that was his personal trainer that says, I can get you sectioned again and drugged up to the eyeballs, like that. I can, yeah. So that's what's worth looking into. And you just do it at the pay. Like, I've been begging God, like one of your previous guests, I've been begging God for years. I want to know everything. I want all the memories. It's my mind. I deserve to know. And it's like God has been like, okay, little by little, and like, take a look at this, take a look at that. And so it's a journey. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And it's not always a happy ending. Like, I'd love to be one of those guests that says, oh, I'm healed. Look how I got healed. Here's my book, how you can get healed too. I still struggle. And some survivors say it's from the cradle to the grave. My faith has me fight against that diagnosis, but I have to say it's lifelong scars. It's I look forward. I would love to be a happy ending story before I die, and in the meantime, sometimes all I can say is I'm still here, and I know I make a difference. I know I have survivors reach out to me all the time and get encouraged or avoid suicide or even pursue justice. I feel like I need to get braver in terms of, I don't want to go into full-on lawfare, but I think I need to stop being such a pushover for blatant injustice. So it's a journey, but that's my advice, is look into, they say this ancestry DNA thing. Yeah, it could be a huge just DNA gathering. Like, they could be gathering DNA to do experiments as to how to develop bioweapons that will target certain genealogical groups. I'm sure that research is documented, but at the same time, you can't live in absolute fear. I can't do this in case of that. I can't do this in case. This is where faith comes in. It's like that, a simple thing about that is, the reason I say grace before every mouthful of food I eat is because it's not to be holy or religious. It's because it might be poison. And faith in action can supersede poisonings or assassination attempts, many of which I've survived. So
that Satan's the biggest copycat, but he knows he'll never be Jesus.
no,
Never
he's
be
always,
our God. So that
yeah,
is
he has to get us to contract with him. He has to get us to agree with him. So the biggest thing we can do is like, no, I don't consent to that. No, I'm not agreeing to that at all.
Jesus is always bigger.
Yeah, and Lisa says that. Okay, let's just do this again. And I'm sorry, I tried to. I'm
You
not
did
very
great.
good.
It's so much to fit in. It's so much. I can't even fathom trying to put all this together, much less try to compress it into a little podcast. So
Yeah, well, we kind of covered the grandparents,
yeah.
and to a great extent my parents and their siblings. And I'll try and move on to the next at least 2 generations I could document. And I just want to empower people to see. I don't want it to be a death sentence that if there's at least 3 generations, it's embedded and it's very hard to break. Yeah, that is true, but it's not impossible. Nothing is impossible with God.
We should all be encouraged by it. We're learning the terms for what it is that we may have, that we may know has been going on in our families or that we see happening in other families. Once we know, now we can take that knowledge and do something with it. So to me, it's
Yeah.
really inspiring to learn all of this, because it
Okay.
opens up our eyes to how we can heal. Now that we know what the term is, it's generally generational trauma. Now we can take the time to heal. So I
Absolutely.
appreciate you breaking all this down, Angie.
Yeah, yeah, and I appreciate your work. And let's do this the next time same time, same place. Just let me know when it works for you, and let's just keep breaking this down. So it's just to get outside the goldfish bowl and see. Whoa, that's my family. Do you know what I mean? I thought that was normal. No, it's not normal.
It's not
It's
normal. No.
not normal. We need to create a better new normal.
Well, before we go, let people know where they can find you online, where your blog is, what social media you're on, and I'll link it all.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm shadow banned, as we know. I've lost my main YouTube, my main Facebook, I got deplatformed all over the place. But so the best way to find my links is to go to my YouTube channel, Angie Power Disney, and then under each of my videos, I've got my BitChute link, my blog link, my Twitter link, my Facebook link. And where else am I? Twitter, Facebook, BitChute, angelascaches.org. Instagram. I've got an Instagram. I'm not very active on there, but so Angie Power Disney or Angela Power Disney or angelascaches.org. But as I say, if I'll comment under this video when Emma publishes it, and then just go to my YouTube channel, find any of my old videos, and there's links to all my socials on in there.
Perfect. And I'll link all of that below too. So you guys can also go below this episode and just go click. We try to make it really easy for you. And
Yeah,
this is the best way that we can support survivors. This material does get shadow banned. It's not
yeah,
elevated in the algorithm. So if we want more people to know about this, and I know everybody listening does, the best thing that you can do is go hit that follow button, go subscribe, and then copy the link and share it with a friend, share it with somebody else that can go find value. And then as we do that, we overcome the minority and we become the majority that way. So that's how we get this information past the MSM markers and past all the algorithms is one by one through us. So
yeah.
please support Angie, you guys. Her work is amazing. And Angie, do you want to pray us out before we go today?
Yeah, definitely. And I'll just say my daily place is Facebook, Angela Teresa Power Disney. Power
Okay.
Disney is very unusual. I don't think there's anybody else with that name on Facebook. So, and Teresa is Teresa. But anyway, Lord, I thank you. I don't know if it's 6:05. I don't know how long we did, but we did good. I want to thank you for this platform, for this beautiful and very intelligent and very brave interviewer, Lord. And I want to thank you for just the way people are starting to network and the beauty of that, and that we need to take advantage of that whilst the opportunity is still available to us. I pray for supernatural networking to be assisted by your angels, Father God, that you would just continue to put people together and grow this community and keep taking us to deeper and deeper levels of truth. I pray for a quickening of the anointing and the spirit, that we might get even sharper and sharper in our words, in the way we get the truth out there, because time is short, and we just pray for ears to hear and eyes to see. We break and bind spiritual blindness. It's like there's been a huge amount of exposure of evil, but I pray for that blind eyes might be opened, deaf ears might be opened, and hard hearts might be softened, stiff necks might be. I pray for repentance, Lord, for a softening of hearts and um, breaking of spiritual blindness, so that as many as possible, Lord, can rise up to help to protect children. Bottom line, protect children and heal adult children whose lives were devastated. I pray this in Jesus' name. Pray a blessing on everybody listening to this, and please share and please pray.
Amen. Thank you, Angie. And for everybody listening, thank you so much for supporting. God bless you, and we'll see you next week.